This calls for intentional coordination efforts among stakeholders. As such, national governments are encouraged to promote conducive environments towards private sector investments in agri-food systems while ensuring effective public sector support. The Kampala strategy emphasizes the need for investment quality to ensure that funds are efficiently used and allocated to sustainable and impactful initiatives. This includes the needs for special financing opportunities to support entrepreneurship within the agri-food systems, particularly for youth, women, and small-scale producers as key stakeholders in Africa's food systems. Now, during the session today, we will explore how integrated agro-food parks and seaweed aquaculture in particular, two innovative and high-impact models, can help to unlock the hidden middle. These approaches not only reduce food loss and create off-farm jobs, but also present a strong business case for public-private collaboration. We will explore why these two models are important to talk about today. Transformation of food systems is pressing. Growing populations, climate change, and persistent rural poverty demand innovative, scalable solutions. Over the next 80 minutes, we will see how these approaches through public-private partnerships in food processing, agro-food parks, and aquaculture can unlock investment, strengthen value chain linkages between industry, smallholder food producers, and SMEs, and drive inclusive and sustainable food systems transformation. In this dialogue, we will hear from leaders in government, finance, and the UN, as well as business, about enabling policies, de-risking mechanisms, and how diverse partners can play their roles in driving investment in food systems. We will also explore practical examples, such as Ethiopia's agro-food parks, which is helping to drive investment here in this country that is our host, as well as the growing seaweed economy, which supports climate resilience and marine regeneration. By the end of today's session, we will leave with a deeper understanding of how policy, concessional finance, technical assistance, and the private sector can join forces to drive investment and make an impact on our lasting food systems. Before I start, I'd just like to introduce myself so you know who you're speaking to, or you know who's speaking on your behalf. My name is Bernice McLean. I'm based at the African Union Development Agency, and I'm in the lead on blue economy, working particularly in fisheries and aquaculture, but as well as agri-food systems as a broader topic. So our format today is a mix of high-level framing. This will be followed by a diverse panel that will cover two main topics and closing reflections that will follow. We encourage you to listen closely and think about how your own work might link into these emerging ecosystems of opportunities. So let me begin by introducing our opening speakers who will help us to frame the strategic importance of today's topic and the transformative potential of these two models. I would like to invite our first speaker, Ms. Sanda Ojihambo, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations Global Compact, to please take the floor for her opening statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for making the time to join this session, which is really so important as we unpack and unlock the full value chain of agriculture. Allow me first to just acknowledge UNIDO for co-convening this important session with us and the panelists who are going to follow. I head the UN Global Compact. It's an organization that works with over 20,000 businesses worldwide to see how we can use a set of principles to make the businesses more resilient, more competitive, more sustainable, but at the same time contribute to the important agenda of the United Nations. This year for this Food Systems Summit, together with the FAO and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, we have convened about 300 businesses comprising close to 50 CEOs, a global range of businesses, to come together to really see how the private sector can work alongside the public sector in transforming food systems. We're honored to be here. We have three key objectives that we want to follow through this Food Systems Summit. One is to demonstrate progress, and we're going to hear some some of that today. The second is to unlock investments, and we've had SME pitches, we have had investment dialogues such as this, and the third is accountability. We've had sessions on accountability this morning. But be that as it may, I think it's important to now focus on the real actors, where literally, we know that food systems are being transformed on the ground. And here the private sector does play a key part. And we know that business is part of that alignment around immediate and coordinated action, because as we saw from yesterday's report launch, we definitely need a more equitable, sustainable, resilient, and inclusive global food supply. Business, along with people and planet, has much to gain from this transition. On the first day here, we did a field visit. I followed the field visit that went on to the wheat and the banana food value chains. It was really important to take those few hours to listen to farmers, to listen and understand how public and private has come together to empower the SME sector. It was great to listen to farmers talk about the opportunities that have been created by the cluster farming methodology that the government of Ethiopia has put in place. It was great to understand, though, the challenges that they had around scale, around access to market. And it was really important to just take all of that and come into this summit and really try to unlock this missing middle that we want to talk about. We know that the SME sector plays such an important role in global economies. SMEs employ close to between 60 and 80% of most workers. SMEs contribute significant amounts to global GDPs. But to bridge this investment gap that we must bridge to be able to transform food systems, there's three key things that I would like to share with you that are important in the context of this dialogue. The first is that we must direct investment to the hidden middle of food value chains. And this includes components such as processing, logistics, storage, packaging, and handling, segments that often SMEs have a deep investment in, and they have huge economic, social, and environmental impacts. But these are often overlooked by investors. This can be as simple as building drying facilities for seaweed and storage centers for dried products. And staff or those working there need to be properly trained to work in both to maximize the most potential. Agri-parks are a great game changer with the ability to host all of this infrastructure, resolving the issues of the hidden middle. Such investments will directly benefit smallholder farmers and SMEs who can then sell their products at a much higher price, establish trademarks and brands for regular income, and build consumer confidence. So the first, direct investment to that hidden middle. The second is we must unlock innovative and inclusive financing solutions and partnerships that have real impact on the ground. And here, let me talk about one of our sister organizations, the UN Joint SDG Fund, where I sit as part of the advisory group. We witness here firsthand the power of collaborative, creative financing initiatives. In Tanzania, the fund is establishing a de-risking mechanism to position Zanzibar as a leading seaweed industry hub, working yet again with local businesses directly benefiting women and youth. In Nigeria, the Joint SDG Fund is supporting a special agro-industry processing zone with IFAD, co-financed by the African Development Bank and the Islamic Development Bank. And in Tajikistan, joint programming is unlocking World Bank funding for logistical support. So second, innovative funding that will get right down to where it's needed most. And thirdly, we must broaden our perspective to what a global food system looks like. On the African continent, we know that there's still so much underutilized arable land and agricultural potential, and the ability to also invest further in the livestock value chains. But there's also the green and the blue economies. Sustainable ocean, blue sources, including aquaculture, must also be part of broader food systems discussions. Sustainably farmed seaweed, one of the greatest untapped nutrition resources on the planet, has enormous potential to feed the world and help regenerate engendered marine systems. Time is running out, dear colleagues, much as we sit here during the summit. We really must roll up our collective sleeves and move to action. Because to transform our food systems, no one sector can do this alone. We need collaboration across public and private. We need catalytic and innovative financing, and we need pace and scale to be more accountable, more ambitious, and be sure that we don't increase the numbers of those who are going to sleep hungry every night, and that we certainly are able to transform our food systems. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. Some very key points there. Focus on equitable and sustainable food systems. I'd just like to highlight this point. It came out of the former ministerial panel earlier today, actually from the Minister of Tanzania, who stated that the right to food is also the right to choose how we feed ourselves. And I think the points that you raised there are critical in this point. So thank you very much. Our next opening speaker, I have the pleasure to invite Mr. Gunther, and I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce this correctly, Beger, apologies, who is the Managing Director of the Directorate of SDG Innovation and Economic Development at UNIDO. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, business leaders, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, it's an honor, dear Sander, to jointly open this dialogue at UNFSS +4, where we are focused on bridging investment to smallholder farmers and SMEs by unlocking the often overlooked hidden middle, as you mentioned, hidden middle of food systems, logistics, processing and infrastructure. But let me begin also by thanking our partners, the World Business Council on Sustainable Development, FAO, and the UN Global Compact for convening this timely discussion. And dear Sander, you set the scene and gave us the background, including necessary figures. We at UNIDO, we are pleased to spotlight two models that offer practical solutions for food systems transformation, integrated agro-food parks and seaweed value chains. Today, my opening remarks will focus primarily on the former. Let me mention only two figures. 30 to 40% of food produced in the field is lost as waste or spoilage. And the reasons for this include lack of transportation, insufficient storage capacity, or non-existing processing industries. As one consequence, the continent Africa imports 80% of its processed food. This alone leads to an annual loss of around $50 billion in value creation. Integrated agro-food parks, which UNIDO has been developing for many years, primarily in African countries, address this fundamental problem and facilitate local value creation. These parks create ecosystems that bring together farmers, processors, logistic providers, and institutions. They attract investment, reduce post-harvest losses, generate rural employment, and enhance food quality. These parks serve as anchor infrastructure that links local value chains to broader market. And we will hear about this later in the panel. Integrated agro parks were also highlighted as priority interventions at the World Without Hunger conference in Addis Ababa last November, here in Addis Ababa, which produced the Addis Ababa Call to Action, a roadmap emphasizing local value addition, infrastructure investment, and improved access to finance for small-scale producers and SMEs. At this conference, UNIDO joined together with FAO in collaboration with Chamba Center the launch of the report Ending Hunger is Possible, which advances income-generating solutions through agro-industrial development. Building on this momentum, I'm pleased to share that UNIDO has now come back to Addis to launch our food loss and waste strategy. We did it yesterday, and this strategy outlines 10 concrete actions, for example, scale up our successful approach of agro-food parks, enhance food safety, and catalyze agro-processing. Ladies and gentlemen, this dialogue is also a platform to explore how public-private partnership can unlock investment and strengthen industry SME linkages to drive food systems transformation. At UNIDO, we see three principles as critical to effective public-private partnerships. First, co-design and co-ownership. Strong partnerships are built on a shared vision that aligns public goals with private incentives to find win-win solutions, such as improving infrastructure or investing in cold storage to connect farmers to commercial value chains. Secondly, de-risking private investment. Many agro-industrial opportunities remain untapped due to perceived risk. Blended finance, technical support, and public infrastructure can help reduce this risk, especially for first movers. And third, anchoring local value chains. Public-private partnerships must be inclusive. Smallholder farmers and SMEs should be full participants, not just suppliers, but creators of value. This strengthens rural economies and promotes long-term resilience. Let me underline that integrated agro-food parks are opportunities for the private sector, which many companies are already taking advantage of, and hopefully should even more advantage of. Excellencies, colleagues, as we look ahead to the UNGA 80 and COP30, let's use this dialogue to scale investment, expand partnerships, and deliver real transformation in global food systems. We, as UNIDO, my team, Dejen, Ali, and the team, we stand ready to work with all of you, governments, investors, and farmers and innovators, to make this vision a reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. For the future speakers, there's some stairs behind here. I don't want anybody to have a health risk here. So thank you very much, Managing Director, for those very impactful words. I'd like to just highlight also that the 3 principles of PPPs that you are highlighting are very much embedded in the CADEP strategy, the upcoming one. So we really look forward to seeing how those can be rolled out to facilitate implementation. And I'm very excited to hear about, in the next panel, on the examples that you've spoken about. So thank you for the 2 opening speakers. Your insightful interventions have really provided a useful framing for the next component of this session, which is the panel discussion on enabling scale through partnerships, with special reference to integrated agro-food parks and to seaweed aquaculture. We are going to split this panel. There are, I believe, 8 speakers in total. So we'll start with the first 4 speakers. Mr. Dejen Tezera, Director of the Division of Agribusiness. If I can invite you up to the stage. Division of Agribusiness and Infrastructure Development from UNIDO. Ms. Katie Carson, Director of Corporate Affairs, Global Food and Climate Policy at Tetra Pak. Ms. Paula Felipe, Regional Manager, Financial Institutions Group, Upstream and Advisory, Eastern and Southern Africa from the IFC. And Mr. Joaquin von Braun, I hope I said that correctly, from the UNFSS +4 Advisory Board and Scientific Advisory Committee to the UN Food Systems Hub. Welcome, please. So I'm going to ask you to provide your interventions in the order that you are sitting in. So let me hand it over to Mr. Dejen Tezera. I'm going to ask you each a question. And because we are a little bit pressed for time, we would very much appreciate it if you could speak between 3 and 5 minutes, but if you have to keep to the 5 minutes, that's okay, we understand. So, Mr. Tezera, I'd like to ask you, what key lessons has UNIDO learned from implementing integrated agro-food parks in Ethiopia in particular, that have helped build strong public-private partnerships, and how can these models be scaled up across Africa? Over to you.
Thank you very much. Before sharing our lessons learned, let me say a few words about integrated agro-food parks. An agro-food park model is similar to the hub and spoke model, where the hub is a central processing unit or industrial zone, if you like, and with all the necessary infrastructure for agro-industry that includes power, water, storage facilities, waste treatment, and even ICT services. And this central hub is somehow networked with rural transformation centers, which are closer to the farmers and are used for aggregation of raw material for the industries, a bit of pre-processing, and also for the provision of extension services by private sector, including agricultural inputs. Also, this platform or rural transformation center is an interface between the industries and the smaller farmers and so on. So this infrastructure relatively reduces the initial investment cost by food processors drastically. So, and then the facilitation with the linkages of smaller farmers to industries will be facilitated in this way. So going back to the lessons learned, the first lesson learned is that selection of the site for agro-parks should be carefully and technically sound, and they should be, let's say, done in consultation with the private sector as much as possible. And it's also, it will be very appropriate if there is a large-scale agricultural development program to build synergy between the agricultural production and the processing. So in all these cases, involvement of the private sector from the beginning will be extremely important. The second important lesson we learned is that we have to have a very strong institution, an entity which coordinates the development of parks from pre-investment studies, feasibility study, pre-feasibility studies, and the construction and the operation and management of the parks. So this, if we have a weak institute to coordinate all the stakeholders, it will be extremely difficult to have a successful, let's say, industrial park. The third one is a holistic approach. A lot of people think that industrial parks, agro-food parks are the physical infrastructure only. Physical infrastructure is important in the center, but the whole activity around the catchment area of the park, that means in about 150 to 200 kilometers radius where the agricultural production happens, is extremely important. That means the linkages through rural transformation centers to the farmers to support the smallholder farmers to produce more surplus to the desired quantity and quality of the private sector is extremely important. Also, the capacity building in terms of skills, and then also connection to research and development, business development service providers, and one-stop shop, especially for the tenants of the park, are extremely important. Another important factor is a proper study. In some countries, parks are developed through the turnkey model, where less, let's say, feasibility or a pre-investment study has been done. Let's say pre-investment studies are critically important to produce bankable business plan for financing the infrastructure development part of the agro parks. Environmental and social impact assessment is also critically important for the industries to settle there, but also for, let's say, accessing climate finance, which is now becoming more and more available. That's it. So on scaling up, I think the park infrastructure is extremely expensive. Let's say it costs about $1 million per hectare of the park. So working together with international financial institutions for financing this infrastructure, especially the blended finance, is extremely important. As I said, synergy with other programs like irrigation project is very important. With African Development Bank, UNIDO is working on industrial park or agro-food park 2.0, where most of the work has been done by private sector. Previously, we have been working, mostly the infrastructure part was done by public sector, but now more and more private sector involvement in the park development is a critical factor for the success. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you for keeping to time. The next I'm going to ask Katie Carson, please, Tetra Pak Director, Corporate Affairs, Global Food and Climate Policy. Katie, from a private sector standpoint, how can companies be better engaged in value chain investment, particularly in strengthening the hidden middle? And what policies or incentives would encourage more sustainable private investment?
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this panel today. And it's on a topic which is very much at the forefront of our approach to food systems transformation at Tetra Pak. So what we do at Tetra Pak is very much part of that hidden middle. If you know Tetra Pak, you probably know us best for our carton food packaging, but we're also an advanced manufacturer in food processing technologies and equipment with over 140,000 processing units in operation globally at our customer sites. So very much operating in that midstream of agri-food value chains between the farm gate and consumer plates. And many of our customers, the food manufacturers, are small and medium companies, so the regional manufacturers or SMEs operating within the food manufacturing sector. So, I think we've heard the importance of strengthening the hidden middle, and it's really a key imperative for food systems transformation. It's also, it's an imperative also from a decarbonisation perspective. So the hidden middle accounts for just over 20% of food-related emissions, but of course it is essential for fostering broad economic growth, supporting farmers' livelihoods, and enhancing supply chain resilience. So when we talk about food systems transformation, much of the policy focus we feel is very much tends to be at the two ends of the chain, so on agriculture and then on consumption and dietary shifts. But a more robust hidden middle can really deliver the wide-ranging benefits that we have heard. So when we're looking to address both the challenges of achieving food security and decarbonisation, recognising the potential of the midstream and what it can unlock, and that it can unlock really that ripple effect of positive outcomes. So really we feel the role of the private sector is key, both in terms of sort of scaling up value chain investments, but also sort of fostering that ecosystem which builds capacity, which unlocks growth, and which can support those food manufacturers in the midstream. And I think what we see today and what we've seen over the past couple of days is that the solutions are there today. Many of the solutions that we need are already available. For example, to reduce food loss and waste, for energy and water efficiencies within food manufacturing, to enable more circular food production, for example, through upcycling side streams, as well as innovating for new foods, and can really have a significant positive impact if we can get that scale. So there's a lot of innovation and investment. There's also a lot of innovation and investment in product development, for example, fortified foods to address nutrition deficiencies, and also those technologies to develop plant-based and foods from, for example, precision biomass fermentation, or indeed the processing capacities for underutilized crops, for instance. And at Tetra Pak, obviously we're working with our customers, but we also work with startups, for example. So it's really about supporting through our global ecosystem our customers when it comes to recipe development, product production capabilities, and the scale-up of new products. So that innovation and technology is available today, but we really need the right investment climate to enable uptake of those new solutions, and this is particularly important for SMEs. And that's really where the policy and the incentives are key to accelerate change. So we really need that targeted investment and smart policy interventions, including in the midstream, to enable transformation. We know that today less than 5% of climate finance, for instance, is allocated to agri-food systems, and one of our key calls for action is that investors and governments redirect, scale up, and make climate finance, including blended finance, more accessible across the entire agri-food value chain. And we also need to ensure that there's policy coherence and no trade-offs on food security in policy and investment decisions. We heard about food loss and waste. So for instance, when we're talking about food policies related to packaging, then we need to ensure that they are not exacerbating issues of food loss and waste. So really creating that enabling ecosystem as well as the policy environment is necessary to stimulate investment and support its sustainable and inclusive growth across the full agri-food value chain, including in the hidden middle. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for keeping to time. That was exceptional timekeeping, so well done. Next, I'm going to move to Paula Felipe from the International Finance Corporation, Regional Manager, Financial Institutions Group, Upstream and Advisory for Eastern and Southern Africa. So Paula, if I can ask you, from a development finance perspective, how can institutions like the IFC help to de-risk investments in agro-food and blue food value chains in particular? And how can concessional or blended finance be structured to crowd in private capital? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to participate in this very important event. So what I'd like to talk about today is a concrete solution which IFC is deploying to unlock financing to the agri-sector. It's well known that bank financing to agri is less than 10%, even as agriculture accounts for over 60% of activity in Africa and 30% of GDP. So critical on financing agri is the lack of financing to production, i.e. smallholder farmers. There's a 240 billion need estimated, and only 70 billion has been made available. This presents a challenge, but also a tremendous opportunity for FIs to be able to expand their market segments, at the same time address an important need of the continent. By providing financing, it strengthens farmers as well as the value chains consisting of the SMEs that support them. The solution which IFC is rolling out leverages on technology to incentivize financial institutions and lenders to lend to the sector, which historically has been very perceived to be very high risk. We call it the Africa Agriculture Accelerator Program, or AAAP. The ambition of the IFC is to deploy $6 billion in financing to improve productivity in 5 million hectares across the continent by 2030. We're going to be employing a holistic solution combining both financing, unfunded and funded investments, as well as our technical advisory capacity to strengthen the agri-sector. So the key element in the solution is the SME AgTech. So we've talked about traditional SMEs within the agri-value chain. The new player here is the AgTech. So what is the AgTech? The AgTech provides technology solutions which integrate players of the supply chain into their platform to facilitate better visibility and reduce perception of risk. So the AgTech essentially is the orchestrator, coordinating all of the actors from input suppliers to off-takers to service providers on transport, storage, harvesting, etc. So in order for the AgTech to deliver on its de-risking role, it needs to be able to provide value add on the following. So we've seen AgTechs who are able to perform this to provide, to enable banks to lend to the agri-sector. So through satellite technology, they're able to map and profile farmers, enhancing KYC. They manage input distribution, they provide extension services, facilitate mechanized services, provide market access, and facilitate data analytics. So the AgTech SMEs implement a phygital approach where agents on the ground complement the tech infrastructure. So in IFC, we have evaluated about a dozen AgTechs across the continent and are currently in the process of implementing pilots in several countries. But I'd like to talk about what we have done in Morocco and Ethiopia as concrete examples of how we've taken this concept into action. So in Morocco, we assisted Sowit and AgTech to map 25,000 hectares in Morocco and 80,000 across Africa. They have gone ahead to pilot 400 hectares in wheat, and the pilot resulted in 0% NPL, demonstrating again the benefit of having this solution to de-risk lending. At the same time, production was 30% better than the previous harvest period and better than the national average. So now, in scaling up, they're looking at over 2,000 hectares, and in that, IFC has provided a risk share facility to the financial institution who will be lending to these farmers. We provided an additional grant to expand Sowit's mapping to 40,000 farmers and are in the process of linking them with another financial institution. In Ethiopia, we're also working with Lursha and Kefia to link with banks and to provide financing to key crops such as barley. Essentially, what we've seen here is that this is a practical solution to use technology, this new SME player in the agri space, to help de-risk lending to the agri sector and also make the operation of origination and monitoring more cost efficient so that banks who had previously stayed away from the sector can now participate in a way that's economically viable and also aligns with the business objectives of the financial institution. So we're very excited to take this forward and achieve that ambition of $6 billion across the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and again, thank you for keeping to time. This panel is exceptional. I'm particularly interested to hear what you are saying. We've been working in aquaculture for a number of years now, and in particular, the agility and the innovation with the DFIs is an essential component to aquaculture development on the continent, so congratulations. Okay, I'll move to our next speaker very quickly, Mr. Joachim von Braun. Sorry if I'm murdering your name. I hope I'm pronouncing it okay. Joachim, if I can ask you, what are the growth potentials of food processing industries and related SMEs in Africa? And what research or data gaps need to be addressed to inform effective policy and investment decisions? Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you for these questions. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to report about potentials in the food processing industry in Africa, drawing on a couple of studies which we have done, business studies in this field. And I point to initiatives that we need in order to tap these potentials even more. Fundamental for the potentials of the growth in the food processing sector is still the growing population growth, even more so the urbanization in Africa, and income growth. We observe an increasing share of processed foods in Africa's food imports. That is more than 1/3 of total food imports to Africa are by now in value terms processed. We did last year a study by the Malabo-Montpellier panel called Value Up, Policy Innovations to Advance Africa's Food Processing Sector for Growth, Jobs and Health, and that has a number of very positive and optimistic messages. I'm co-chair of this panel, and I'm happy to recognize also a panel member here, Ismail Sunga, the Executive Secretary of the Southern African Farmers Union. What do we find there? We identified countries which were particularly successful in enhancing growth in food processing. And out of this analysis came Senegal, Kenya, and Ghana. And they have already a fairly high share of processed foods in intra-African trade, So Senegal and Kenya, about 55% of their intra-African food trade is processed, Ghana about 30%. We see a fairly strong performance of competitiveness in this sector. What's needed, however, is in order to achieve takeoff in this sector is machinery for processing, and preferably many of the food processors nowadays want automation in their processing because the demand for safe food and low waste drives towards automation. Importing this machinery in the 3 countries which I mentioned costs per annum typically between $100 and $200 million a year. That needs to be financed. Otherwise, entering into the food processing sector is difficult. We don't have yet this machinery industry in Africa. That's why there is, for the takeoff, the need for importing this machinery. We did another survey in my institute on obstacles and how to overcome them in the food industries, in food processing industries in Africa. We did that survey in Ethiopia, Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa in 500 registered agro-processing firms. Now, we find from this survey two types of obstacles. One is in staff terms, in personnel terms. Skilled personnel for the automated food processing industry is a major constraint. In the survey, 40% of the companies say that's our problem. In the only mechanized, not automated firms, it's about 20% of the companies who say that's a problem. So the obvious conclusion from that is we need a massive investment in skill up, in skilling the personnel that can run food processing industry. And the other constraint is with the machinery and their operation. There in the hardware, in the automated food processing industry, hardware malfunctioning is often mentioned. Up to 60% of our survey participants of the 500 say that's a problem. It's less of a problem in the only mechanized sector. But the highest problem of running the food processing industry is with power failures in the 3 countries and in others. So that's where the public investment is so important for the hard infrastructure, the power system, to have reliable food processing industry performance. So let me sum up. Focus on skills, financing the machineries, facilitating the hard infrastructure, and a strong attention, which I add, to the demand side of the food processing industry. If these things are facilitated, then the sky is the limit, a leapfrogging is possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for summing up so clearly as well. It saves me my job. So thank you very much to the panelists. I'm going to ask you to please just file down and stand in the front here so that the photographers can take a nice photo of you. And in the meantime, I will then introduce the next panel. So thank you very much. If we can have another round of applause for our panelists. Okay, so yeah, in the front. They'll stand in the front. So while they are busy having a family photo, just to reiterate, we've been given valuable insights into building strong public-private partnerships through integrated agro-industrial parks, as well as how the private sector can be better engaged in the value chains. We've also heard how DFIs can help to de-risk investments in agro-food and blue food value chains, and we have heard which priority research and data gaps are needed and skill sets are needed to be addressed to inform effective policy and investment decisions. For our next component of our panel session, we'll now turn to look at how aquaculture, and particularly seaweed aquaculture value chains, thank you, can unlock investment, can strengthen value chain linkages between industry, small-scale food producers, and micro, small, medium enterprises, and drive inclusive and sustainable food systems transformation. While we are busy just adjusting here, maybe I can just mention that at AutoNEPAD, we have been working for the last decade to support countries to sustainably develop their aquaculture industries, and more recently to strengthen their seaweed value chains, and have seen the transformative potential of the sector to provide livelihoods, drive innovation, attract youth and women entrepreneurs, and stimulate growth. We've also seen the importance of a coordinated and responsible approach to the development of the sector, and the importance of promoting multi-stakeholder consultative processes. There is still much to do, and we look forward to hearing from the next panelists on some of the insights and solutions for this sector. So I would like to call up to the podium now, in order of speaking, Mr. Vincent Dumazel, Senior Advisor and Head of the UN Global Seaweed Coalition. Vincent. The second speaker will be Jacqueline Corbelli, who is the US Coalition on Sustainability and CEO of Brightline. Jacqueline, if you could come up too. The third speaker we will have is Mr. Chris Brett, who is the lead agribusiness specialist at the World Bank. Thanks, Chris. And then last but not least is Mr. Etienne Ndatimana, who is the program director of East Africa from IDH. So thank you, please come up. Now, as in the previous panel, I'm going to ask each of you a leading question, and I trust you'll be able to answer. So we'll start with Vincent. Vincent is a champion for seaweed, for global seaweed, and is really making his mark on the sector and for driving interest in the sector. So Vincent, maybe what I can ask you is, what is most needed to scale up investment in seaweed and blue food in particular? And what outcomes from the recent UN Oceans Conference, the UNOC 3, do you see as the most significant for advancing this agenda? Thank you.
Thank you very much to everyone. I will stand for the ocean. Today I'm a bit concerned and full of hope and optimism, actually. A bit concerned because we heard yesterday that 673 million people are starving today on this planet. A bit concerned because we have every day on the planet 300,000 people to feed in addition. Because according to recent studies, in order to feed the global population in the next 50 years or so, we will have to produce as much food as we ever produced as human beings over the last 12,000 years. And this will have a cost, and we all know what is this cost. I mean, yields in crops are declining. The cities grow bigger and the arable lands get smaller and smaller. In the meantime, our food systems are the biggest contributor to global warming, to pollution, water scarcity, biodiversity loss, and modern slavery. So there's something very wrong here, and we need to find new solutions. And I think the biggest part of our problem relates to our obsession with land food-based. We are obsessed with the soil. I mean, think about it. Our planet is covered by 70% by ocean. 70% of ocean covers our planet, and they contribute to less than 2% of our food. It's insane. And it's even worse, actually, because on land, we grow food, or we grow life. I mean, life grows on 20 meters or so. In the ocean, we are talking about 4 kilometers of life, in average. So all in all, on this planet, we have 96% of the inhabitable space that is ocean. 96% of the inhabitable space contribute to less than 2% of our food. So the solution is here. We have it. The greatest untapped resource is in the ocean, and we will need investment for that, because if we move from prehistory to modern history 12,000 years ago, moving from hunters-gatherers on land to become farmers, we never did that in the ocean. And we're not going to wait 12,000 years to build this new solution in the ocean. We will need to go way faster, and for this, we all need investment. I mean, if we want to repair the ocean instead of destroying them, the best place to start is seaweed. That's the lowest trophic level. Seaweed is a source of food, of animal feed, of biostimulants to replace fertilizers, source of packaging. It can repair the ecosystem, it can sequester carbon, and bring source of revenues to coastal communities where fishing resource will disappear in the future. So seaweed is the best place to start. We don't want to start aquaculture as we did so far. We don't want to reproduce the mistakes we did on land. We want to do regenerative aquaculture. All together, seaweed, fish farms, oyster farm, and so forth. I was a couple of weeks ago in Norway. In Norway, they are growing salmon. They are growing salmon, and they feed this salmon with GMO soy meal coming all the way from Amazonia, where they contribute to deforestation. Soy is 25% protein. Next to this salmon farm, you have some seaweeds that have 40% protein. But they just don't use it because they don't know how to grow them. We need investment to learn how to grow seaweed and develop an integrated aquaculture that can feed the entire planet. And that's a very good news to all of us, I think, because that's an ocean of solution that is lying there. We should stop thinking about aquaculture as we did so far. We developed aquaculture in order to replace food because we were running short of food from land and running short of fishing resources. But still, we are feeding so far this aquaculture with food from land and with fishing resources. So there's no progress here. We should build a new model. UN Global Compact over the last 5 years took a lead into that, and with a visionary and very bold approach, UN Global Compact built the first ever global seaweed coalition, gathering 2,000 stakeholders in order to regroup these pioneers all around the place, and we now became the voice of this seaweed industry all around the planet. We generated investment, but we will need much more, because it should go beyond seaweed, it should go way further, and that is aquaculture. So we need a next step. I mean, at the last UN Ocean Conference in Nice, with the support of the government of France, Madagascar, Indonesia, and soon many others, with the support of UNFAO, UNEP, UNIDO, and UNCTAD, we announced the creation of a UN Global Seaweed Initiative that will ultimately report directly into the Secretary General, hopefully. And it will be launched at the UNGA in September in New York. And that's really the beginning of something really big and very new, a systemic revolution, once again, in the food system. We have to build new food systems out of the blue, I mean in real terms. We should stop this obsession with land, and we should start something with the ocean. And if we learn how to cultivate the ocean, that's a very good news to all of us. Because so far we fed the next generation with drama and fears. And I think we should stop with this wrong narrative, which will turn into self-fulfilling prophecy if we continue like this. We should tell the next generation good news, solution, and hopes, and seaweed and ocean are amongst the greatest hope we can have on this planet. So if we learn how to farm the ocean, we may be remembered as the first generation. I mean, the next generation, will be remembered as the next generation, as the first generation on this planet, which will feed the entire world population for the first time ever in human history. They may be remembered as such while mitigating climate change, restoring biodiversity, and alleviating social injustice. They may be remembered as such, but we will need all of you for this. So thank you very much, and thanks for your support in this revolution.
Thank you, Vincent. Very nice to hear also that one of the African member states, Madagascar, is leading on this and really providing the much-needed championship on the UN Seaweed Initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it straight from the seaweed horse's mouth, the seahorse's mouth. The passionate call to change the model that we are working with, and really try and think outside of the box and look at building new ways of feeding ourselves. For our next speaker, I'm going to call on Jacqueline Corbelli. Jacqueline, if I can ask you, what do you see as the most critical missing piece in solving the hidden middle challenge, and how would you describe your vision of a healthy and functional business ecosystem? Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to address this very important question. Starting with the most critical missing piece, at least it feels, in terms of hidden middle that we're focusing on in a literal sense. And we will be successful if we can shed light on the path to addressing the challenge of the unseen. I think addressing what's hidden and the path to readiness that provides is also what it's going to take to reposition stakeholders across the value chain, and how to take systems-based action and decisions that create the readiness that we're talking about. That requires a straightforward way for stakeholders to engage and demonstrate the progress being made to get into a ready position. The right approach, of course, needs to recognize the pivotal contribution of SMEs and foster a better bridge to facilitating their progress. And just as critically important, reflect the unique considerations for investment that exist all along the value chain. Getting to broad-based standards around investment is, of course, a worthy path and undertaking, but realistically, we know this takes time, and perhaps more time than we have, given climate issues that continue to grow more and more in their acuteness. It speaks to the need for speed and highly functioning platforms that can facilitate cross-value chain, cross-stakeholder work, flexible tools that can drive and supply specific requirements, and it's an important and encouraging time for that, given the advances in technology that can be leveraged, including AI, and specifically reinforcement learning, as well as RAG technology. And without getting into too much detail on that, these are forms of machine learning that provide the type of support that investment needs for its own internal process. And providing this is a missing link in the bridge between investment and SMEs' needs that deliver that systems-based true readiness that's needed. AI has a special role to play there, and when we get there, I believe we'll be at a totally different level of understanding of the symbiotic relationship between business interests and the developments required to build these value chains and with resiliency and sustainability.
Thank you so much, and thank you for ending before your time. I see some real synergies between what you are saying, Jacqueline, and the former panel, the end of the panel speaker, Joachim, talking about the skill sets needed for AI and so on. So thank you very much for closing that loop. Okay, our next speaker, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Chris Brett, who's the lead agribusiness specialist at the World Bank. And just ask Chris, what is the World Bank doing to support integrated aquaculture for food systems and seaweed in particular? Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, hello there. So my name's Chris Brett. I'm the lead agribusiness specialist at the World Bank. I'm saying the word agribusiness, but we've also launched Aqua Business. And 3 years ago, we set up what we call the Aqua Invest platform. And under the Aqua Invest platform, we're very close to bringing the private sector and the public sector together to invest in aquaculture. Now, I've been asked to really talk about seaweed, which is a very strong component within our platform. And I have to say that about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I bumped into people like Vincent and so on through the seaweed work. And what was really interesting was I had no idea, as I started the journey, how many people were interested in seaweed as a product. There's an informality around it and an emerging formality. So under the Pro Blue Trust Fund at the World Bank, we were given some funding to look and develop a report called New and Emerging Markets on Global Seaweed. And I'd urge people to look at that. You can Google it and download, and you can see there that there is huge economic opportunity, particularly in the industrialization of seaweed. Not just about for a human food product, which is very common in places like Korea, and other countries, of course, in Asia particularly, and emerging in Africa. But we looked at the seaweed market, and the market value in 2025 is $9.4 billion. But by 2035, it's projected to be $24 billion. So there's a lot of scope here. And we've been getting a lot of requests from governments. And I'm going to list out the governments that we're negotiating with at the moment on doing public loans and public funding. And it's Comoros, Kenya, Madagascar, Mozambique, Senegal, South Africa, Tanzania, India, Indonesia. There's Korea that we're working with, Maldives, Philippines, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam. So there's a huge cluster. 97% of the world's 97% of the world's seaweed currently comes from Asia, but is really emerging in Africa. So when we look at the market value, the big growth sector that we're starting to really focus on is biostimulants, soil conditioners, fertilizers, which is going to have a $1.8 billion market by 2030, and that's really started in India already. We're looking at the animal feed markets, which is going to have a value of $1.2 billion by 2030. Increasingly in the pet food market, it's going to be a $1 billion market by 2030 for seaweed, and also methane-reducing supplements within the livestock area, which we're investing heavily to look at really reducing methane within the livestock value chain. Now, I also look at the point of jobs and employment. I want people to take one clear message from what I'm talking about today, that the World Bank has done a review on the situation of jobs globally. And by 2032, there's going to be a requirement for 1.2 billion jobs. And of course, this is involving a lot of youth coming into the job place, and so on, 1.2 billion. And the analysis that we've done across all the sectors is only showing a line of sight of 450 million jobs. So this is a huge deficit, which is going to have a huge global impact, engaging the youth. Before we came into this room, there was the youth conference, which I was listening into, and I was encouraged, but the global issues around youth employment is going to be huge. So when it comes to seaweed, you get one job per 10 tons of dried seaweed. There will be an opportunity to generate 50 million jobs by 2030 within the seaweed markets, and 85% of them will be women, particularly working in this space. And we've also been analyzing Tanzania, where there is 30,000 people currently employed in seaweed. So these are the kind of areas that we're looking at. We've heard also from Vincent about the climate and the environmental benefits, so I won't be going into that. But at the World Bank side at the moment, we've received funding from the government of Korea to really look at how do we generate and look at really strong policies for research and innovation. We have to take seaweed as a value chain, not just as an informal product. And as a value chain, the first thing we've got to do is have line of sight of supply. So we're looking at how do we invest in the right seaweeds, the right research to develop seaweed, then into the processing and then into the markets. So we have an awful lot to do, but we're very, very pleased and encouraged by a lot of the governments that are coming to us and saying, how do we get this major innovator really moving in our space? So real strong call to action there, and I'm looking forward to continuing working in this space. So thank you very much, okay? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. Yes, I think for the seaweed sector, the African Union is really looking into this as well, and we have seen definitely the potential for the sector to provide some of Africa's priority development aspirations. What I do know is that whatever is done will need to be equitable, and we'll need to find solutions for the women farmers that are farming at the moment and the youth that are coming up. We're seeing a lot of innovation particularly in the food sector, by the youth. And I think we need to look at being agile as policymakers in terms of providing adequate standards to allow them to trade and to diversify their products. So thanks very much for the effort that the World Bank is doing on that. Okay, last but not least, I'm going to turn to Mr. Etienne Ndatimana, Program Director for East Africa for IDH. Etienne, from your perspective, what can be done to strengthen value chain linkages between industry, smallholder farmers or food producers, and SMEs, and drive inclusive and sustainable food systems transformation? Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the invite. So at IDH, the work of linking smallholder farmers to market is at the center of what we do. We were founded 17 years ago to help improve sustainable trade between food producers and global markets. So we use a value chain approach where we link smallholder farmers in producing countries with international markets, focusing on exports, crops such as coffee and cocoa. That's where we started. And now in our new 5-year strategy, going up to 2030, we refocus more on food crops for enhanced food security and better income for farmers, especially in Africa. And to do this, we follow 3 approaches. One is we work with SMEs as change agents that help bridge the connection between smallholder farmers and large buyers or food manufacturers. In Africa alone, we are working with over 100 SMEs that collectively source from about 500,000 smallholder farmers in 7 countries from Southern Africa to East and then West Africa. Number 2, we are facilitating dialogue and partnerships with large off-takers to change their procurement practices in favor of local sourcing for food produce. This is happening in India, in Nigeria, Southern Africa, and soon in East Africa, including Ethiopia. And we are engaging the likes of Unilever, Nestle, PepsiCo, and other major brands and manufacturers. Third, through FarmFit Fund, we directly invest in farmer-facing SMEs and financial intermediaries that directly serve smallholder farmers. So far, we have deployed over 50 million euros in food processing SMEs and MFIs, microfinance institutions, that collectively are serving about 1.2 million smallholder farmers. So I would say that in summary, we can say that investing in rural aggregators and processors is a sure way of connecting the smallholder farmers to the formal markets, be they domestic, regional, or international. And early lessons from our fund, FarmFit Fund, suggest that there is a huge gap for patient capital to serve adequately food SMEs on terms aligned with their business model and pace of growth. And here, when I say patient capital in agriculture in particular, we are looking at capital that is availed at the right time, because in agriculture, if it's planting, there's no waiting, you miss out the whole season. It should be availed on the right terms. For example, it should be cash flow based, lending, if it's a lending, instead of, I give you my money today, and I hope you start repaying a monthly basis from next month. That's also quite a challenge. The cost of capital. Cost of capital goes in many ways. In particular, I wanted to focus on one, the cost of Forex hedging for local borrowers. I feel like if there was any area in particular we should support is this one, to reduce the cost of lending, especially when these SMEs are borrowing from international funders, including impact investors that have a global scale. And consequently, from what we've learned from FarmFit Fund, where we try to provide patient capital, we are fundraising now for a second fund for between 100 and 200 million to scale this work. But we know still that's going to be a drop in the ocean. So we are really calling upon investors and other capital providers to allocate more funds to the agriculture sector, especially for the small and medium enterprises and smallholder farmers on appropriate terms. Why? Because we believe, as has been said by many speakers before me, that our own good health and the future of smallholder farming producing countries depends on sustainable investment in food systems. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think, once again, you've provided a circle-back loop also to the previous discussions on integrated agro-industrial parks. where you talked about the importance of investing in rural aggregators. So I think we have a lot to learn from the experience that you've brought. The need to focus on the cost of forex. This is a very important one, particularly in aquaculture, which is a capital-intensive business. And we've seen huge challenges to local aquaculture producers, particularly in that line. So thank you for that. We come to the end of our panel session. So if we can just give the panelists another round of applause. I'm very sorry that we're not going to be able to open up for questions due to the time constraints and the need to meet the upcoming closing session of the event in total. So if I can just ask the panelists to step down, and we'll ask for a family photograph again in front. So thank you so much to all the panelists for your insightful interventions. You've really highlighted some of the key issues and opportunities for unlocking investment, strengthening value chain linkages between industry, smallholder food producers, and SMEs, and to drive inclusive and sustainable food systems transformation through aquaculture and seaweed farming. So thank you for that. Now, while we are waiting for the family photograph, I'd like to draw to the concluding session of this event. And it is my utmost privilege to invite to the podium His Excellency, Mr. Mabuba Diagne. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Apologies if I did not. Minister of Agriculture, Food Sovereignty, and Livestock for the Republic of Senegal. Thank you, Minister. We are inviting you to provide closing reflections and a call to action. Thank you for giving of your valuable time to be here with us. We know that time for ministers is very constricted, especially at this time of the event, so we really appreciate your participation. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody. When you ask a former banker, now who become a minister, to talk about bridging investment to small-scale farmers and SMEs, I get confused because I don't know which hat should I wear. I would start with a small story. I come from Senegal, from a relatively modest family background, and at very, very early age, I started being an entrepreneur. At very, very early age, 14, I started buying vegetables and selling vegetables. And you start facing the real challenges of a small agribusinessman. From time to time, some of the goods that are unsold get rotten. Why I'm telling you this story? Because this has taught me very, very valuable lessons in life. The importance of selling before producing, and the importance of being able to store or to transform in order to add some value. Africa is currently importing over 100 billion euro to feed itself. Everywhere we are saying that the post-harvest losses range between 25 to 35. In certain countries, it reaches up to 40%. Today, what are the challenges of the small-scale farmers? Beyond the challenges of climate impact, productivity, profitability. If I tell you that in Senegal, farmers, especially the small-scale farmers, work less than 90 days in the year because they mainly depend on rains. And this is where I believe the value chain starts. The quality of the soil, the availability of the water in quantity and in quality. In Senegal, we have something that we call the 3FTC. We need to train the farmers, formalize the farmers in order to be able to expect to be able to finance them. And I will come to the financing because it's about bridging the investment. Apologies to say it too openly. When we join these kind of conferences, we hear billions of dollars, billions of euros from big boys, World Bank, FIDA, African Development Bank, AFD, UNIDO. But are these billions of dollars that we are talking about every single year reaching the small-scale farmers? Look, the World Bank has the greatest intention, and apologies to state also too openly, being unable to do the job sometimes, they say, we give the money to the banks, and they will give the money to the small-scale farmer or the SMEs. We have seen that it is not working. By the way, I have done it for 20 years. I was regional managing director for Trade and Development Bank. I was finance vice president of the ECOS Investment and Development Bank, so I know the game. For 20 years, it's not working. If we want to help the small-scale farmers, we need to address the soil. We need to address the availability of water. Maybe commercial banks cannot do it. 90% of the African governments, they have debt problems. And the world is telling, to solve this 700 million food problem, let's act together. Acting together for me, meaning getting into the countries, helping them to do what they can't do. I give you one simple example. Senegal import 1.4 million metric tons of rice. The majority of this rice is cultivated by small-scale farmers who don't have access to land, who don't have access to availability of water, who don't have access to mechanization. This is where the value chain starts. I think the World Banks, the global donors, the UNDP, the United Nations must go and solve those fundamentals. Unfortunately, it's extremely very difficult for countries to do it. Now let's move again through the value chain. We assume that the small-scale farmer gets a piece of land that is ready to be farmed. He has water. We need to leverage technology. And I am very glad to see the World Bank keep on talking about this ag-tech. I have experienced personally that the youth are not telling that we don't want to do agriculture. What the youth are telling, we don't want to do agriculture the way our grandfathers are doing it, especially in Africa. The youth, they want to keep their mobile phone, monitoring the greenhouses, take their mobile phones, monitoring the center pivot, take the mobile phones, doing TikTok. This is what the youth are looking for. I have heard something very, very, very important about planning and marketing. In order to help these SMEs, the small-scale farmers, through the value chain, government must act and do what I will call in French, de la planification agricole. Very simple term. We need onion 400,000 tons in a year. From January to December, the government, together with the different actors, together with big boys like UN, big boys like the World Bank, help to do the planning and say January, February, March, this is what we need to produce, this is what we need to consume. Changing global policies. Through the World Trade Organizations, the world is telling the African governments or small-scale farmers, you must compete with the big boys in America, with the big boys in Brazil, with the big boys in China. Is it working? I'm not sure. You can fix a small problem back home, but distort by big importation from countries because they deal with skills. Now, transformation. If I take the example of Africa, 90%, 95% of the product are sold in a raw format. There's no value add. If we want to sell the small-scale farmers, we need to put more money in the pocket of the small-scale farmers and make agriculture and livestock farming more attractive. And I believe that technology and innovation can leapfrog the food sovereignty and the job creation in Africa, and in general, in the world. Brazil has solved the problem through Embrapa. You have seen the agri-success that China has done the last 50 years. The same. Without even leaving Africa, look at what Ethiopia has done the last 5 years in wheat. And I strongly do believe that the UN, big organizations like the World Bank, must rethink the way they do things. And I think that taking the small-scale farmers, taking the SMEs through the value chain, and helping the countries, helping the system, the different actors to do what they can't do, will address the real problems. How can you imagine the cheapest protein today is maybe poultry? Am I right? Maybe if we add the innovative algae things that our friend Vincent is talking about, maybe yes. But now, one of the cheapest protein is poultry. Poultry is 90% or 80% maize and soya. We are struggling to produce it. Why? Because the three fundamentals are missing: quality of the soil, quality of the water, and adequate training, / the tools, which is mechanization. Now, assume that you have taken us through the journey till the production is there. Government and the young man from Ghana said it. You are a small agri-startup. After 2-3 years, you start paying 30% taxes. How can you survive? And all those things affect the profitability of the small-scale farmers, affect the profitability of the small, medium enterprises, making the investment, bridging the investment extremely difficult. What is the solution? Maybe blended finance. We hear the World Bank talking about blended finance. Try to go on the ground and try to do real practice of blended finance. It's extremely difficult. Maybe the solution, look at the World Bank. They have MIGA that does insurance. They have IFC that do private sector. They have EBRD that do the public sector side. They have IDA that do the concessional financing. Maybe bring those 4 pillars, assist the government to do real blended finance. Making financing cheap and affordable for small-scale farmers, making financing cheap and affordable for SMEs, and holding their hands through the value chain. This could include linking them with a global multinational through an outgrow program où on forme, on formalise et on finance et on aide à transformer et à commercialiser. And I strongly do believe countries like Holland, what they have done with Rabobank, countries like Italy, what they have done with Coldiretti, countries like Brazil, what they have done with Embrapa, and this concept of cooperative agricole communautaire, where they take the small-scale farmers, they put them into cooperative, build mechanized centers, make irrigation, smart irrigation available, making cheap financing. I would not even say cheap financing, appropriate financing available. I think that would be the solution. Madam, this is the end of, I have been very long, but this is, of course, you realize that this is a subject that is very, very close to my heart. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those very bold guiding words for us to take away. So I'm not going to say anything else, just call to an end for the session. Thank you for your time and your interest, and just to encourage you to please talk to each other, to network, and to continue innovating and finding solutions in this realm that we work in. Thank you so much.